Hello and welcome back. Before I begin, I'd like to give a big thank you to Zimmerman62 and the Story Girl 1996 for becoming my two latest subscribers. Thank you both very much, I really appreciate it. And now, on with the haul. I was going to say I was fortunate enough to get, but at the outset I thought I was fortunate enough to get one film from the McNaughton Popular Viewing Collection this week at Johns Hopkins. The film I got was The American, starring George Clooney, directed by Anton Corbijn. And I was eager to see this because Anton Corbijn's first feature film was called Control, and it was a biopic about the lead singer of Joy Division. And that was actually one of those films that I just picked up completely at random and thought, oh, this looks cool, and it turned out to be really good. So I was looking forward to his next film. And I also read the novel on which this was based, which was written by Martin Booth, and you could find it under one of two titles. One of them is The American, because they reissued it with that title. But the other one is A Very Private Gentleman, which was the original title. And I enjoyed the book. It wasn't a perfect book. It had its flaws, but it was just, you know, when your brain needs a little relaxation, but you don't want to completely insult your own intelligence, it was just an enjoyable reading experience. I was curious to see what they did with it for the film. And unfortunately, what they did for the film was they took pretty much everything interesting about the book out, and they didn't replace it with anything interesting. So basically you have a lot of pretty Italian scenery, and I'm not a huge George Clooney fan, but if you're a huge George Clooney fan, you do get to look at George Clooney. But the plot didn't make much sense. They took a lot of the complications and interesting things about it out of the book, and it just moves at a really boring pace, which the novel itself moved a little slowly, but it's first person, so you're inside the narrator's head, and it keeps things interesting. But honestly, I cannot say I would recommend this. And now for my borrowings from the main library at Johns Hopkins. First up, I got Siberian Lady Macbeth, which is directed by the famous Polish director Andrzej Wajda, and is based on a story by Nicholas Leskov, and was also the basis, that story was also the basis for the opera Lady Macbeth of Mtsensk. This is, I guess it certainly has its parallels to Lady Macbeth, but in this day and age, I think we would recognize it as more of a Thérèse Raquin or Postman Always Rings Twice kind of story. I watched it this morning and I really enjoyed it. Obviously very grim and a little bit violent, but I thought it was a very well executed film. And you may recall a few weeks ago I was talking about La Bête Humaine, which was directed by Jean Renoir, and I would say if you like that, you would also really like this, and vice versa. And the rest of these Hopkins borrowings I have not yet seen. Next up is Dog Days, which is an Austrian film about a group of people leading sordid lives in the dog days of one summer. And then The Convent, which is directed by the famous Spanish director Manuel de Oliveira. And I am ashamed to say I've never actually seen anything by him, so I'm really curious to see this. It's a supernatural story starring Catherine Deneuve and John Malkovich, and they go to a convent and someone appears who may or may not be the devil, and they go to the convent because he's doing research that he thinks will prove that Shakespeare was Jewish, and then some mysterious figure appears. I haven't watched it yet, but it just sounded so weird. How could you not be interested in it? Then I got Ulysses. I've been sort of ODing on the silly classic costume dramas lately, but this is obviously based on the Odyssey and stars Kirk Douglas, whom I really like, and Anthony Quinn, whom I also really like. And then Tight Spot, a classic gangster drama starring Ginger Rogers and Edward G. Robinson. And Rockers, which is a Rastafarian version of Robin Hood. Then from University of Baltimore, I got Nothing But the Truth, which is based on the true story of Judith Miller, who went to jail a few years ago rather than reveal her source. And she was a reporter, she went to jail rather than reveal a source for a story she'd written. And this just sounds like the best movie. I haven't watched it yet, but it stars Kate Beckinsale, Matt Dillon, Alan Alda, Vera Farmiga, and Angela Bassett, which is just a great cast, and it's directed by Rod Lurie, who did 2 other really classy thrillers that I really liked called The Contender and The Last Castle. And you may remember a few weeks ago I was talking about Ridley Scott and how Ridley Scott is one of my favorite directors because he has that kind of classic Hollywood capability to deliver a picture that's just really entertaining and just purely enjoyable, but that also really doesn't insult your intelligence. And Rod Lurie, from the couple of his films I've seen, seems to be really capable of that too, so I am looking forward to this. Then from Stevenson University, I got The Mirror, which was directed by the great Russian director Andrei Tarkovsky. I believe it was his last film. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was his last film. And this is a semi-autobiographical meditation on his childhood during World War II, in part. It's Tarkovsky, so it's never really quite that straightforward. The interesting thing was that if you had, knowing this was a Tarkovsky film, I could tell it was. I could see his hallmarks there. But it reminded me of a bunch of other films I'd seen too. The great Russian war film, Come and See, Abel Ferrara's The Addiction, which is actually a vampire movie, but some of his techniques reminded me a little bit of the techniques he used in this one. And I was a little, I guess, had my hopes up because on the back of this DVD it says, through this essential film, viewers may find the puzzles that provide the key to the director's other works, including The Sacrifice and Solaris. And you may recall I watched The Sacrifice a few months ago. Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking Stalker, not that. Well, I've seen The Sacrifice as well. And it really didn't provide me with any keys to his other works, but I still really enjoyed it and would recommend it. And then I got season 5 of Queer as Folk. This is the last season. And I have to say the first few episodes, I was thinking, oh dear, we're back at season 1 again. It really wasn't as interesting as it had been in the middle 3 seasons. But by episode 7, it seems like it's really kicked into gear. I have only a few episodes left, and I'm eager to see how it's going to wrap up. And then from the Sights and Sounds department of the Enoch Pratt Free Library, I got Where is the Friend's Home? This is directed by the famous Iranian filmmaker Abbas Kiarostami, and I actually have never seen any of his films either. His most famous film is probably Close Up at this point, but this one is pretty well known too. It's the first in a trilogy that continues with Life and Nothing More and Through the Olive Trees. And this is a film about a young boy and his classmate who get their notebooks switched. And the classmate is going to be expelled from school if he doesn't turn his homework in the next day. He's been lax about turning in his homework. So this young boy decides to set off by himself to his friend's village to return his notebook to him. And I thought this was very charming and well done. I would recommend it. And then I got The Exiles. This was a French film about a Parisian couple who, on the spur of the moment, decide to pack it up and go to Algeria. And it's kind of a road movie, and honestly, I found it a little bit silly. I wouldn't really recommend it all that much. And last but not least, I'm so excited for this because I went through the catalog pretty carefully when I first got my library card, and I thought I had figured out everything they had that I wanted to see. But then I was just looking in the stacks last week, and I found this mini-series, Sex, Chips, and Rock and Roll, that I didn't even know they had. And it's 3 volumes, and the reason I'm really excited about it is that it stars Sue Johnston, who plays a main role on one of my favorite BBC television shows, Waking the Dead. And this is from back in, alright, I can't see the copyright date on here because it's obscured with due date stickers, but it looks like it's from the 80s maybe. And it's about 2 sisters in navigating the changing world of 1965. And it's set in the 60s. It's a BBC miniseries. It stars Sue Johnston. This is going to be great. I cannot wait to watch this. And if you've made it this far, thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me for my next video.